edition of World Crisis Radio. This is your host, Webster Tarpley, here in Washington, D.C., and we're recording for you here on the afternoon of Friday, January 26th, 2018. And we have a full plate here of interesting news. The first thing you should be aware of is that the State of the Union address is going to occur next week, and an interesting twist. Normally, you know that there's the speech made by the president or tenant of the White House, as the case may be, but that's then followed by at least one reply. If the Democrats are in the opposition, it's usually one reply. If the Republicans are in the opposition, it's often more than one reply. That is, you have the establishment Republicans, maybe Mitch McConnell or some designate or Ryan or somebody of this type or somebody chosen by them quite often. And then you have the various lunatic splinter groups on the far right. You might have the Libertarian Caucus. You might have the Tea Party Caucus. These are not the same, giving their alternatives. So generally you get a kind of a menagerie of Republican views. But this time there's a new variation, and it is that Trump is going to give his speech, and then right after it, I guess in competition with the Democratic reply, let's see how this works out, the real reply is going to be given by Stormy Daniels. Stormy Daniels will be coming on the Jimmy Kimmel show, and she will give the reply, and she will undoubtedly discuss things that are not normally included in the reply. There are all kinds of commentaries on Trump's mode of operating that I'm sure Stormy could provide. So the public has a right to know, and there we have it. So that's coming up. It's going to be Tuesday, January 30th. In the chamber of the House, right, in the well of the House, although nothing is too well about this regime. So that's coming up. So look forward to some real interesting shenanigans. Now, we have principal news today from Davos, Switzerland, right, the monster fest of the neoliberal globalist elitists. And, of course, we are second to none in opposing them. In particular, we oppose their neoliberal rip-off conception of economics. Right? We are the New Deal regulated approach, the dirigistic approach. We've just celebrated the birthday, once again, of Alexander Hamilton on January 11th. That's Dirigism Day here in the United States. Hamiltonian economics. As long as we had it, we were okay. And once we lost Hamiltonian economics, Andrew Jackson put this country on the path to civil war. And that's his big failure. Interesting thing about Andrew Jackson, right? Trump touts himself as a reincarnation, a clone of Andrew Jackson. And to some extent, you can see Andrew Jackson invented the spoils system, right? Not ability, but party loyalty. To the victor belong the spoils, said Andrew Jackson. Of course, that meant federal government patronage jobs. And lo and behold, that's what Trump does too. He wants to put his hangers-on, right? His retainers, his sycophants are the only ones that can go into those jobs. Now, in Davos, we covered during the week, and I refer you back to the relevant broadcast. I think it's the Wednesday broadcast of The American System. To find that, you've got to go to just americansystem.tv, americansystem.tv, and you will see there that even before Trump got there, there had been a chorus of revulsion and rejection from all corners of the world, all different kinds of countries, rejecting the insanity of Trump's strategy and ideology. And we cataloged it. We have certainly Macron of France saying France is back, and we have a 10-year plan to rebuild the world economy. I'm afraid their plan is still mired in neoliberal ideology, but at least they're proposing something. Macron is that France is now going to be the leader, and he essentially was polemicizing not just against Trump, but also against Trump's buddy, or should we say Trump's master, President Xi of China, Xi who must be obeyed, as they say in the White House. So Macron is saying, no, not Xi, not the Chinese. They're, as many insiders know, they're beginning a phase of decline because of their stupid Malthusian demographic policies, their one-child per family policy. That's not going to leave them in a good position. So Macron is making his bid. Merkel comes out, the usual stuff, European integration, unfortunately, neoliberal economics. This is the Achilles heel of these people, right? She says we need free trade, free markets. This is not what you need. You need dirigism. You need the Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau approach under the Marshall Plan. And Gentiloni, right, saying, look, this rhetoric of America first, right? He said, I could go around saying Italy first, but what does it get us? It doesn't get us closer to the things we want. The things we really need are only available in cooperation with others. Now, he's got this problem going on that the Grillo party, the five-star movement, it sounds like some chain of cheap hotels, but the five-star movement is bidding to become the largest party in elections in Italy that are going to be held in the beginning of March. So Gentiloni has that problem, and I wonder what the U.S. Embassy in Rome is doing, probably helping the Grillo gang. We'll be following that. So anyway, they have problems. It's the one country that hasn't been through the mill of an election with populist demagogues in the running. Right? France had it with Marine Le Pen, defeated it. Germany had it with this Alternatives for Germany. That was at least kept within bounds. And now Gentiloni faces it. May, whose government could fall at any time, she has the same kind of problem. The aftermath of Trumpian-style, crackpot nativism, populism, xenophobia, and it's an appeal. Ultimately, it's an appeal to old people. It's a gerontocracy. It's an appeal to moral senility and intellectual senility. So May tried to be nice to Trump, at least to avoid setting him off. Right? She didn't want to trigger him, but she didn't want to kiss him either because he's hated in Britain. One of the British correspondents was able to extract from Trump an apology about retweeting those scurrilous, racist, vile things from Britain First that Trump chose to retweet. Trump tells Piers Morgan, now of ITV, BBC, whichever, telling him, I didn't know what it was. I just retweeted. So you're the president and you retweet? You have the CIA and you do everything in the dark? It's idiotic. It's just idiotic. It's intolerable. And hopefully we won't have to tolerate it that much longer. Unfriendly. And Trudeau of Canada also had a whole different view compared to Trump. So that was the prelude to Trump at Davos. Now we'll get to Davos in the next segment. Back to World Crisis Radio. We urge you to keep up with us here on World Crisis Radio every week. Program is available on Saturday afternoon, in the late afternoon to evening. It's then available on tarpley.net and elsewhere. And we want to direct your attention also to AmericanSystem.tv. AmericanSystem.tv is where you can sign up for the daily program, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, right? Keep up with it. And go and take a look at the topics, which are described essentially in the headlines. So, Davos. Don gets to Davos, right? What can we talk about? Mark Twain's Innocence Abroad. I'm sorry, it's not innocence. It's guilty conscience abroad. Maybe that. Fear and trembling and sickness unto death abroad. Who knows? That would be Kierkegaard. Big headline. Don was booed. Trump booed. Trump hissed in the room and especially in the overflow room. So this was an absurd spectacle. This was really catering to infantilism. And I think what has happened, the people who decide to play ball with Trump discredit themselves. They ruin their reputations. They essentially destroy their own careers. It seems to be a rule. In this case, we're talking about Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab is the founder of the World Economic Forum in Davos, and this has been going for almost 50 years. It goes back to, 1970, about that time frame. And this guy, he's got to be an honest broker, but of course this is globalism, so money talks. I guess power talks. So Schwab has joined the ranks of the sycophants. So what he did was, in order to make Trump feel propitiated, and we know this is a matter of adulation and some very, very dubious, boasts usually, and there were some. This occurred today. So Klaus Schwab got this marching band only for Trump, not for anybody else. Nobody else was so weak and infantile that they needed it. So we have a marching band going back to Switzerland around the time of Napoleon, the early 1800s. And these guys are doing the marches, and that's the music for Trump to come in. It hasn't been done before, as far as I know. I've been following these things too, not all the way back, but significantly. Very rare event. Schwab obviously felt that he had to go over and above in adulation and propitiation and sycophancy, and he did. We're told that in the overflow rooms there was a lot of laughter, a lot of scornful laughter, right? Not good-natured, not laughing with, laughing at this weakling who needs, for some reason, what Obama or Xi or Putin or who, they didn't need it, but he needs it. So he got booed. Then inside the hall, there was supposed to be a bunch of walkouts. There were some that you could see. I would leave that open. You could just see individuals walking out, especially in the Q&A. And we're told otherwise. One estimate from inside the hall is that at the end, Trump got applause from 20 to 30% of those there. Let's award Trump a generous and probably unjustified 1/3 of the crowd clapping for him. The rest of them, stony silence, sitting on their hands. Schwab, in addition to providing the marching band, went out of his way in the introduction to praise Trump's tax cuts. And you can see what this is. The Davos audience are the legions of greed. They are the legions of greed. The overwhelming climate is it's determined by financiers. Now, there may be actual industrialists in the crowd. There certainly are, but the tone is set, as in globalism in general, as in neoliberalism in general, by the financier. The zombie banker, the hedge fund hyena. These are the people who, and they're ideologues, right? They're entourage of retainers and so forth. So that's who you have in the hall. These are the legions of greed. So it was an appeal by Schwab to say, look, essentially saying, we know he's a buffoon. We're here to propitiate him because he has opened up this possibility of a bonanza, a windfall, a killing for you guys in the United States. So he praises the tax cut, and then he says, Mr. President, your strong and powerful leadership has perhaps sometimes given rise or has created the potential for misconceptions. So the word is that old Schwab got booed too. He was also booed. So I think that's a tremendous stain on Schwab. He does not stand for civilization in any recognizable form. Now, Trump's speech, of course, is the usual boasting and blustering, but also fibbing, shall we say. It is essentially, I have ushered in the economic millennium. We now have more jobs being created. We've got this tremendous stock market bubble. Why don't you come in and join the stock market bubble? Yeah, just in time to get wiped out when the bubble goes down. In other words, you're going to be buying high and selling low, if at all. You better stop loss orders in there. And well, what else does he have? It's the usual tissue of boasting. Maybe we should try to demystify some of the boasting, because it really is outrageous. He wants you to know that Apple is going to bring, is it $300 billion? I'm sure it's a purely arbitrary figure back into the U.S. But the main thing is hyping euphoria about a stock bubble and not really too much more. So the idea is, come and invest in the United States. We want you to come in. This is not exactly America first. This is America as the servants or slaves of others, right, of the capitalists. So the U.S. would be the helots and the foreigners would be the capitalists. I guess that's his idea. That's his speech. But now we'll do some fact-checking in virtual real time. Become on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. This is segment 3 of our show, being recorded here on the banks of the Potomac on the afternoon of Friday, the 26th of January. Now, Trump boasting, braggart who boasts. So naturally he goes through this thing saying, yes, under my administration, more than 2 million jobs have been created. Well, not so fast. That's probably the case, but does that stack up as some great thing? Because Trump says, as U.S. companies and foreign companies come pouring in, everything is pouring. It never rains in Trump world. It pours. They're going to be pouring in. How does he stack up against Obama? Well, not so well. We already knew by last August that Obama was 10,000 jobs ahead of Trump in job creation. That was last August. So now we are at the point where we have the statistics for 2017 as a whole. So we've got the December 2017 job creation numbers. Well, don't look now, but whatever Trump has going in the real economy, this is not speculative hot air, okay? We're not talking Wall Street bubble. We're talking Main Street. We're talking actual job creation. The December 17 job creation numbers are the lowest that they have been in 4 years. So a great December? Yeah, in your dreams. This was a very mediocre December. And now, what does that mean for the whole of 2017 compared to 2016? So 2016, the last year of Obama, and 2017, except for those first 20 days, right, 3 weeks, it's the first year of Trump. So get ready, gang. Trump is significantly below Obama. He's almost 200,000 jobs below Obama, despite the hype, despite the lies, despite the fibbing. There were, in the year 2016, 2.24 million jobs created. So call it 2,240,000 jobs created in 2016, all through the year. So Obama, 2.24 million. What about Trump? 2017, called this the first year of Trump, 2.06 million jobs created. So 2,060,000. So it's getting to be about a $200,000 gap. Okay, so the difference also, you want to know the figures per month. In 2016, it was an average of 187,000 jobs per month. That's Obama. 2017, 171,000 jobs per month. That's Trump. So this is pretty shabby. Now, you realize a lot of people say, what? How can that be? Trump is always saying that the jobs are being created. The companies are pouring back in. The investment is pouring in because of Make America Great Again and deregulation. It's all a bunch of garbage. And if you believe this stuff, you better watch out, because a fool and his money are soon separated. And that, if you believe that, after all of this stuff with Trump, and notice, if the average for Trump was 171,000 jobs per month, that's the sign for the future. Obama in December 2016, right? Lame duck. 187,000 jobs, right? 16,000 jobs more. So again, this is a really shabby performance, nothing to write home about, and it's pure hype. It's just lying, exaggerating, and the Goebbels system, right? Repeat the big lie again and again and again. And then he had this stuff about, those huge bonuses. This was a funny scene. He says, why? There are a lot of people in the United States who are going to get a bonus of $1,000. Some of them are going to get bonuses here and there. There are $3,000 bonuses. And I'm afraid you look at this and you say, those fat cats, right? Those globaloni mongers in Davos, those characters there with their golden parachutes. You know what a bonus means to them? I mean, if it's not several $100,000 for them, it doesn't exist. They don't get out of bed for a bonus of $3,000. Are you kidding? That's a lunch. That's a coffee break for them. And then he's trying to impress them with this stuff. And of course, don't forget, Walmart went from their $9 entry wage, $10 as a standard wage. They went to $11 entry wage. My God, it's a king's ransom. They're going to be rolling in dough. It's going to be Christmas every day of the year. So this is just pathetic, right? And that's your fault out there if you were a dupe for this stuff, because, if you're willing to sell yourself for a mess of pottage, that's really not good. So, that's, I think, now we have more. That's one side of it. Now, we have more, of course. How about the big thing that he talked about, wages? We'll get more about this, but you can already see the stats are largely in. In addition to this substandard, sub-Obama performance, you're going to see that in the critical area, of course, is wages, right? Because this is what Trump talked about, right? Trump says, yeah, everything we do in terms of protectionism and tariffs and everything and kicking out immigrants is supposed to be to tighten the U.S. labor market. You could do this in other ways that are much more direct and much more effective and guaranteed to work, but obviously he doesn't care about those. So what's the story with wages? Here we have statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right, BLS, U.S. Department of Labor, now run by Elaine Chao, although we wish she would get out of there. She was. I'm sorry. She was. She's at transportation now. I've got to catch up with this musical chairs. Same person going from one place to another. And she's a past Secretary of Labor. So according to this, from November 2016 through November 2017, we have an increase in U.S. wages. Got to see exactly which data series this is. 4.47% for the year. 4.47% for the year. So is this the millennium? Is this paradise coming down on Earth? Well, no. The average, now this is the average, this is a long-term average from 1960, Eisenhower, through 2017. So this is going to be almost 60 years, a 57-year data sample. The average increase in U.S. wages is 6.21% per year. So average 1%. Trump delivers 4.47%. I'm sorry, that's nothing to write home about. Back in a minute to World Crisis Radio. We are just debunking and demystifying and fact-checking, refuting, confuting the tissue of lies dished up by Trump in his very unfortunate and poorly received Davos debut. The word is that Trump had always yearned and longed to be accepted by the real cosmopolitan, international, neoliberal, globalist elite of the top zombie bankers and the top hedge fund hyenas and so forth, with a sprinkling of industrialists and a few, what can we say, decadent artists, whatever. And so this was a great moment, right? This was busboys' holiday for Trump in Davos. Not well received. 1/3 at most clapping. Lots of snickers about his marching band. Lots of booing for Klaus Schwab for essentially selling out, for abandoning any standards, right? The superiority of Europe in intellectual matters is a thing of the past if you judge by old Klaus Schwab. So we were talking about wages, right? Trump didn't say anything about wages, huh? Not about the entire U.S. workforce. And that was supposed to be his big issue, raising wages, your paycheck, right? Mnuchin, paycheck, pay envelope even, sometimes they say, right? To show how obsolete a lot of this stuff is. So, as we were saying, the average U.S. wage increase over 57 years, 6.21%. Now, that includes all kinds of times, right? Remember, for example, in 2009, there was a decrease of wages, man, was there ever, by 5.8%. That was, of course, the immediate aftermath of Bush. And when the Republicans complain about Obama's economic recovery, they studiously avoid saying recovery from what? Recovery from Bush, recovery from Paulson, from a bunch of rip-off artists in the Republican administration. Paulson of Goldman Sachs, leading now to a new Republican cabinet chock full of, guess what? Goldman Sachs. Gary Cohn, former head of Goldman Sachs, was sitting there in the audience. And, of course, in the Trump regime, the opposition to Goldman Sachs was Goldman Sachs, admittedly a relatively plebeian, middle-level executive. That would have been Bannon, and a whole bunch of others, right? So this is just crazy. This is Goldman Sachs populism, or better yet, you look at Europe between the wars, be it Italy, be it Germany, you will see that top bankers, primarily, also industrialists, it's true, were there to foment, to finance those cultural populist movements that bid fair to destroy the world for a while. So that's sort of where we are again. So that was that. So the job creation is inferior to Obama by a good 200,000 jobs. The wages, he doesn't mention wages. I'm bringing up wages. He doesn't talk about it. And then we've got, in particular, he goes out of his way saying twice that the black unemployment rate is 6.8%. The overall unemployment rate, 4.1%, which is not much below where Obama left it. But the black unemployment rate now 6.8%, lowest level on record, continues Obama trend. But here's the idea. Why is it? There's actually a black unemployment rate at the very end of Clinton-Gore in 2000, right after Clinton left office, say, in the latter months of 2001, operating on Clinton policies, they were pretty low. Now they seem to be slightly lower, but the reason for this is not the MAGA, right? Make America Great Again, not the xenophobic stuff, not kicking out the Latinos and others, but it's the fact that the level of African American employment by government at different levels, right? Federal, state, local, the difference here is small, and it has been made by more blacks than any time in the last 7 years working in government. And that is to say, under Obama, January 2014, you had 21.8 black million, that is 21.8 million black government workers, I guess at all levels. I'm sorry, this is the overall level. Government employees total, December 2014, 21.8 million. December 2017, 22.34 million. And the idea is that out of that, inevitably, a large proportion are black government workers. So that seems to point to causes which are not the ones that Trump talks about too. So this is a tissue of distortions, omissions, exaggerations, flat-out lies, hype, and so forth. So there it is. So that's what Trump chose to dish up. Now, the overall tone of this was, it was described as, the guy could have been the head of a chamber of commerce. He could have been a governor. He could have been a small country that was privatizing and liberalizing, and he wanted to get you in there with the idea of short-term rip-off profits. Come and invest in my country. Not ideal, and certainly a degrading posture for American presidents, right? America is open for business. America is the place to do business. Come on in, come on down, and so forth. So it's a weak performance. Now, we certainly have to pause and say the Democratic Party and its allies are doing a lousy, wretched job in counteracting, in refuting this kind of stuff. What I just went through, they have staffs, right? They have statisticians. They could do this. Why don't they do it? Well, they should do it, right? Because this part of the story with these fibs from Trump is that they're dancing into an empty void, where you just don't know. Oh, one other thing, right? This is the other big hype from Trump. How could I forget? The gross domestic product. Oh my God. We were told that 3% was going to be easy. And then beyond that, he said, I think we can get to 4%. Or maybe 5%, or even 6%, on and on and on, right? The usual chain of hyperbole. What can we call it? Lying, exaggeration, distortions. So 3% was supposed to be a piece of cake. It was locked in. Well, don't look now, but the last quarter of 2017 has come in at 2.6%, right? Not 3%, 2.6%. We were told that the 3% was in the bag. Sorry, Don, not as easy as you thought. And that then leaves the gross domestic product for the year 2017 at 2.3%. Now that compares last year of Obama, 2016, 1.5%. So it is 10% better than what Obama would go with. But it's nowhere near 3%. It's the percentage. A lot of hype. Long on crust, short on cash. Keep them in a minute. Our next hour of world crisis. The second hour of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from a partly sunny Washington, D.C. here on Friday, January 26th. So just in terms of these statistics we were throwing around in the last hour, the actual job creation under Trump in December 2017, after almost a year of Trump's misrule, or as they would say, his MAGA policies. So MAGA in December 2017, last month, got you 148,000 jobs. 148,000. That's pretty shabby. Obama had gotten more than that the year before. Now, compared to this, remember, Trump, he touts these things sometimes when he mentions them, right? A lot of times he feels that he doesn't want to mention them. But there's a tweet from Trump about a year old, December of 2016, right? President-elect, waiting for the departure of the lame duck Obama. The job creation for that month was 155,000. So right now, this year under Trump, Trump's first December, 148,000 preliminary, and 2016, Obama's last full month in office, 155,000. So Trump puts out this thing saying, that's not good enough. We need 300,000 jobs created per month. Now, let me pause under the economics advocated by the Tax Wall Street Party and by yours truly as a part thereof, we could do much better than that. We could get you into 2 or 3 times that easily, because we would be drawing on the credit creation powers of the Federal Reserve System. National credit creation for job creation. That's the $6 to $7 trillion in new credit earmarked exclusively for infrastructure, subcontractors of that, and then also to solve the student loan debt problem, which is crushing the younger generation, and it accounts for all kinds of distortions in their lives. Plus, we would have a federal job creation program, right? The infrastructure going largely through the states, bonds sold by the states on a tender offer to the Federal Reserve, 100-year, century bonds, 0% coupon, rebuild the entire infrastructure. By the way, today Trump attacked people who give subsidies to industry. He says, we're on the lookout for people who give us these unacceptable subsidies to industry. You lunkhead, this is exactly what you need. This is the essence of Hamiltonian dirigism, credit creation. Right? This has been known, well, since time immemorial, right? That you've got to take responsibility. There always has to be a stimulus. Always. There's no such thing as a healthy economy that just sits there. The government is there. It is primordial purpose is to stimulate the economy. So Trump thinks last year, a year and 13 months ago, he said, we got to have 300,000 a month. And now he comes in with less than half that. And he's still crowing about his epoch-making performance. Right? This is simply wretched. So don't believe any of that. And again, the stuff about a 3% GDP. The claim then will be, once the Republicans are confronted with the fact to say, you had a 2.3% GDP in the entire year and 2.6% in the last quarter, that's pretty mediocre. Oh, yeah, but wait until the tax cut kicks in. The tax cut. This is like waiting for Godot. So don't wait for Godot too long. Who knows if they'll ever see 3% with this gang. They're too much in the thrall of Goldman Sachs and these other companies. So we now need to move on. The one thing we need to add, though, one of the reasons for this mediocre performance is even though economic activity picked up in the Christmas season, it was pretty much imports, buying of imports, which does not rack you up your gross domestic product. We should also call attention to the fact that the U.S. dollar is falling. Is Trump and Mnuchin, are they helping this along? We're also seeing that as the dollar falls in value, U.S. Treasury bonds are getting sold off. The 10-year Treasury has hit 2.13% interest, which is the highest in 7 years, I believe. And that is important. The other thing we have to say, the stuff about the stock market, right? If you can compare the U.S. Stock market has a bubble going. It's a bubble. And compare it, though, to other places. Compare it to Brazil, to the Hang Seng in Hong Kong, and a couple of others, and you will see that these other stock markets, which are not controlled by Trump, or they will not, places where Trump is not even nominally the president, those things are doing better. So Brazil has a bigger and better bubble. Hang Seng has a bigger and better bubble than the U.S. Bank of America says that they have their econometrics and that they're coming up with a sell signal, the biggest sell signal since March of 2013. There is, on the whole, too much euphoria. Too much euphoria. Bonds are falling. Interest rates are rising. We had this stuff from Martin Feldstein, right? As the interest rates go up, and that's what's happening with these bonds. Those are credit markets. That the stock market is likely to correct downward. And the word on the street is we've had a parabolic January, but will it last? So that's all disturbing stuff. But now we got to switch gears now. We got to get into the crisis of the regime here at home and what it's going to look like next week, right? Don is winging his way home. So what's the news? Well, tremendous turmoil, chaos, as usual in the White House. The headlines on Wednesday were Mueller wants to, this would be the special counsel for those who are not keeping track. Special counsel Mueller, Russiagate, collusion, conspiracy, emoluments, money laundering, and, of course, obstruction of justice in all of that. He wants to question Trump about the firing of Flynn and the firing of Comey. And this then meshes with the big story here overnight, which was that all kinds of news organizations, the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC, Politico, many others, say that back in June of last year, Trump had actually given the order to fire Mueller. Fire Mueller. And that, of course, that's the constitutional crisis. That's the end of the rule of law, where you do what you want, and then when they come after you with an investigation, you simply fire systematically, one after another, the people who are investigating you. That cannot be allowed to stand. Anyway, Trump gave the order to McGahn, the White House counsel, fire Mueller. McGahn said, I'm not going to do it, but I'll quit if you quit. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Here we are. The shadows are lengthening in the afternoon of the 26th of January. The shadows are lengthening on the walls of this regime. Building minarets on the sides of the buildings with those shadows. All right. Overnight, the evening overnight news was Trump ordered McGahn, fire Mueller. McGahn said, not doing it. Fire me if you want to. I'm not doing it. And, of course, it was good advice. Trump was asked about this today in Davos, and the answer, of course, was fake news. It was precisely when Trump went into this fake news, this is the press, they're vicious, they're venomous, and they're fake above all. That was when he got booed the most. And the entire story of the booing will come out, I'm sure, on the appropriate cell phones. So we now have to keep track. Which top officials in the Trump regime have threatened to quit and are still on the job post-threatening to quit that we know of? Well, Wray, the head of the FBI, is one, and now McGahn, another important guy, the White House counsel, the counsel of the presidency, not of the president, but of the presidency. So it's also indicated in this article that Trump had considered firing Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general, who is, since Sessions has recused himself. Rosenstein has the oversight on the Mueller probe. Some say that the news that Trump tried to fire Mueller is actually more damaging, even if he couldn't follow through so far. That's more damaging than actually firing Comey. In other words, this would be with no two ways about it, the Saturday Night Massacre number 2 under Trump. In other words, the first one, the firing of Comey. The second one would be the firing of Mueller, special prosecutor. That would be the second Saturday Night Massacre with a vengeance. So what's the corroboration? Well, there's independent corroboration with this. On June 12th, 2017, so this past June 12th, right, last summer, we had an appearance by this character, Christopher Ruddy of Newsmax, who was interviewed by Judy Woodruff on PBS. And Ruddy, his commentary on the situation is that Trump is actively considering whether or not to fire Mueller. So that was the reflection. That was the version of this that he was able to detect, which he put on the air. And there were a couple of others. April, the woman from the is still in the White House press corps, right? Old April had reported something similar, right? That there was a mood that was favorable to getting rid of some of these people. We've also got, in addition to this chaos, that Ray, of course, was told, you got to fire McCabe. Said, no, I'm not going to do it. McGahn was told, we got to fire Mueller. No, not going to do it. I'll resign. This is also comparable. These are also figments of the Saturday Night Massacre, right, where you had Elliot Richardson and Ruckelshaus saying, no, I won't do it. And then, of course, the degraded Bork willing to do it later on, turned down for the Supreme Court. This was still the era, we're told, of Kasowitz and Sekulow, whose presence is considered humiliating by McGahn. We also have that entire group, indeed, around Comey, who are under continuous attack. We just ought to keep up with them, right, so that these names become, if not, household words. Comey's group, right, the group with whom Comey shared the intelligence about these meetings with Trump, where Comey had written his memos, right, for future use, documentation. He took that back to the leaders of the FBI in real time, right? This is very interesting. One of them is Andrew McCabe, Deputy Director of the FBI. On his way out now, under tremendous attack by Trump. James Baker, the general counsel, the top lawyer of the FBI, he's already been transferred out. Jim Rybitsky, out, or Rybitsky, it should be, but that guy, the third of these top leaders, is also ousted. David Bowditch, there's a name, Bowditch, right? This is the navigation aide. So Bowditch would have been a navigation aide. Look it up. Associate Deputy Director of the FBI, and Carl Chattas is the National Security Department boss of the FBI. So these are all people that Trump wants to get rid of. Now, if that's not obstruction of justice, I don't know what is. We should also be aware of one of the aspects of Davos, of course, was a very large U.S. delegation. I don't have a count, but 30, 40, 50. The Russians that we know of were 25 or 30. This would have been more than that. 7 members of the cabinet, right? And Tillerson, Wilbur Ross, you've seen them. 7 members of the cabinet. Now, there were top Russians in Davos. There was Sergei Gorkov, who was involved, this is the VEB Bank, involved in meeting with various Trump officials and retainers. A lot of this stuff was covered up by them. Oleg Deripaska the business associate of Manafort, who's now indicted and facing trial, and a couple of the people from Kaspersky Lab. Kaspersky Lab, which is coming under scrutiny. Were they giving you honest anti-virus help, or were they opening a back door for the KGB? So we have, once again, Gorkov of the VEB Bank. There was also a whole bunch of people from the VTB Bank. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio on the 26th of January. Now, we have to basically be aware of the fact that the climate for people who want to do analysis on governments, how they behave, nefarious activities, what are intelligence agencies doing. There's been a fundamental sea change, and we want to register this here clearly for all. What we're seeing out in the world, and we can see it through the U.S. intelligence community to begin with, but you're going to see that this is the U.S. intelligence community catching up, perhaps, with what others have been doing. What you're seeing with Russiagate and with Trump is a course correction for the U.S. intelligence community to bring them back to reality, and it's an ugly reality. For a good 15 years, the main priority, we know, for the U.S. intelligence community was terrorism, counterterrorism, and all the rest of that stuff, right? And God knows what forms this took. But now, the U.S. intelligence community is being forced by events to shift away from terrorism, anti-terrorism, to the rivalry of the great powers, meaning, above all, from the U.S. point of view, Russia and China, where we're dealing with power that goes far beyond any such simulacrum as Al-Qaeda or even ISIS, right? Whatever they were holding a corner of the Middle East between two different countries, and they were always embattled and under attack. One way to summarize this, right? The U.S. intelligence community, like the Pentagon, forced to shift away from terrorism and counterterrorism to the rivalry of the great powers. The Pentagon, we went into that this week on the American System, AmericanSystem.tv. We went through this question of how Mattis's new report says, okay, the priority is now Russia, China, and similar threats, not counterterrorism anymore. Thank God. This was always crazy. Real power was always, and I'm on record saying this in 2008, right before Obama came in. Real power is in the area of Russia, China, India, Europe, things like this. The big issues, big strategic issues, great questions of state. Not whether some supermarket getting blown up was a false flag operation. Right? This is simply no longer where it's at. Right now, it's Russia and China. And this is what the intelligence community is being forced to recognize. Now, we want to mention some stuff about China, right? In the past week or two, we had some articles about a disturbing episode where the CIA network in China has been rolled up, has essentially been decimated, wiped out, some of them executed, murdered, some of them arrested, never hear from them again, and so on. And it seems to be a defector. New York Times names a guy called Li, very common, the most common Chinese surname. 40% of all Chinese are Li. So this is a new front, and we're also getting a greater awareness of how China operates, right, which is more subtle and perhaps more long-term than this crude Russian stuff. And it is that the Chinese want to invite you to conferences. They want to have, you can give a lecture. They'll write an article about your ideas in some, fairly obscure publication. And that's how they operate. They build networks of influence. The other thing they do is come in and lean on you. They'll say, if you want us to patronize you, for example, if you're a hotel chain, then you can't list your hotel in Taipei as being in Taiwan or the Republic of China. You've got to say that's China. The whole struggle to essentially crowd out the Republic of China on Taiwan and other things, right? Stop worrying about Tibet. Stop worrying about Manchuria. These are causes with different merits, of course, in each case. But the idea is that the Chinese government essentially says, we have all this money, and we're going to use that money to make you shut up about certain stories that we don't like, and that's publications and so forth. And they're quite aggressive. So with the Chinese, there's an attempt at mind control through strong-arming, right? Through arm twisting, using financial incentives and financial penalties. One way and that then goes together with the Russian question, which is obviously hacking, setting up fake events, right? There's more reporting today about Russia being able to set up, I believe, 122 fake events through ads bought on Twitter and these related social media, Facebook and so forth. And the questions have gone to Twitter and Facebook. Why did you do this? Well, we don't know. They obviously couldn't care less, right? They wanted the money. Now, I would also recommend, if you want to find some historical background, go back to Nazi Germany and how they attempted to dominate significant parts of the world economy and therefore politics through cartels, right? The infamous IG Farben cartel, reaching to Standard Oil of New Jersey, Esso, Exxon, Humble, whatever you want to call it, that obviously pulled a lot of economic interest into a certain kind of orbit. So that's what you're seeing again today. To sum it up, the intelligence community forced to shift. And if you're interested in following this stuff, you should shift. I don't want to hear any more about Las Vegas. Tell me about what's going on in the macro realm, not the micro realm, right? Not the little stuff, but the macro realm, the big picture. The big picture is world strategy, superpowers, if you want, great powers. How about this? From now on, it's going to be the IRA, not the IRA. What do we mean? It's not the Irish Republican Army, a bunch of old terrorists, right, whatever they were, and infiltrated like crazy. But the IRA, the Internet Research Agency of St. Petersburg, get it? State actors now take the field. The non-state actors are either shunted aside or they appear more and more obviously as tentacles of the state actors. So, of the Chinese, of the Russians, and of others. So there we are. Now, Hillary Clinton, I would recommend to people, don't worry about the fate of Hillary Clinton. Right? Maybe these Republican attacks are a way to get the Clintons off the historical stage, right? We don't need them. Whatever they represented in 2016, this is all over now. This has-been stuff. I think it's very foolish for Trump and the Republicans to focus so much on Hillary Clinton, who is a has-been. Some would say she's a never was, but a has-been she is for sure. So you're attacking something that's receding into the past. What is Trump going to do when he's confronted by an actual attractive Democratic alternative, right? And there are some. The Democratic senators, there are one or two you could see already that would, with the proper advice, with the proper handling, they could begin to fill the bill. And instead, Trump is completely focused on the backside of the past. So we're told now there's a guy called Burns Strider. Burns Strider is he was the faith advisor to the 2008 Hillary campaign, and the reporting now in the New York Times and where else is that he was guilty of harassment, sexual harassment, and Hillary refused to fire him. Once you espouse these identity groups, you're never going to be able to satisfy all the identity groups, right? With a broad economic program, you can satisfy everybody in some way. But with the identity groups, the concessions made to one of them are made to that group. Back. This is the last segment of World Crisis Radio here for January 26th. Now, we just reported this guy Bert Strider, the faith advisor to the Hillary Clinton campaign, was accused. Women came forward. He was not fired. We're also got a rehash of Lena Dunham and Tina Brown warning Hillary, you're too palsy with old Harvey out there in Hollywood, so you better cut loose from that guy. She obviously didn't do it. Nikki Haley, talking to Politico, denies the rumors that have circulated after Michael Wolff appeared on the Bill Maher show, I guess a week ago today, and says that's a disgusting rumor. Again, that may not play well in certain quarters, but we want to remind people, though, that if you go back and look at Nikki Haley's political career in South Carolina, you will find material there which would certainly be relevant to evaluating these assurances that she's giving us right now. So we don't want to go into that, but if you want to go back and take a look, you can find it quite easily. Now, but let's pull back a little bit here, and we've had all this stuff about Davos, right? What is it? Davos is this. It bills itself as the highest, the most elevated town in Europe. It's up there. And it's, there's a sort of a base camp, and then you can take, there are any number of funicular railways, right? The Seilbahnen, you have those, and then you have this cog railway, very interesting, that will take you up there, and you can get to the top, and so forth, and it's altogether a very interesting place. We have, the most famous treatment of Davos in modern European fiction is just about certainly the famous novel, The Magic Mountain. The Magic Mountain, or Der Zauberberg, by Thomas Mann, German novelist. He started this slightly before World War I, 1912, 13, 14, and then wrote it up in, it's a 700-page work, 1923, and then translated into English a couple of years after that. So, Davos. In those days, the big industry in Davos was tuberculosis sanitarium. This was the generally accepted way of treating tuberculosis, which was, of course, a very dangerous, very deadly, and widespread disease that could pop up practically anywhere because it is contagious. So it's the story of a young guy, Hans Kastorp, from Hamburg, northern Germany. He comes down all the length of Germany and then across most of Switzerland, because Davos is sandwiched in. Italy is a little bit south, Austria is a little bit east, and above this canton where Davos is located, you've also got Liechtenstein, and it's the place is called Graubünden, Grey Leagues, the Grey Leagues, or the Grisons in English. And in my studies of the 30 Years' War, and you can look those up, doctoral dissertation, you can find the importance of this area. The capital of the Grey Leagues area, the Graubünden, is Chur. And when you're crossing the Alps, suppose you're coming from Italy and you're going to Germany, you get across the Alps and then you go into this flatland area, and there you come across Chur. And at that point, once you're in Chur, Davos is an hour or so to your east. So the story, though, is in the pre-war time in Europe, the Belle Epoque, this Hans Kastorp comes from Hamburg, where he's a shipbuilder, young guy, and he comes to visit his cousin, who is sick with tuberculosis, and he's there. So he comes into this world of a tuberculosis sanitarium run by the famous Swiss-German doctor, I guess, Hofrat Behrens. Now, he's not really a government counselor, court counselor, which is what Hofrat would mean, but he's held in such high respect. It's like some people get called Colonel or something like this, even though they're not quite. Colonel Simpson. So here they are in a world, and the dominant feature of this world is sickness, tuberculosis. Mann writes that the staff of the clinic seems to be more focused on sickness and death than on life. It's an allegory of European society, European bourgeois society before the First World War. So if you wanted to analyze Davos today, it's European bourgeois society writ large. And today, their problem is not so much tuberculosis as greed. They are the legions of greed. And that's, of course, why certain people wanted so hard to get in there. The sickness, the tuberculosis, has an almost hypnotic effect on people, and above all, it begins to undermine their sense of time. This is, unfortunately, the influence of such people as Nietzsche or Bergson on Thomas Mann. That time is always, focus is changing. It's all relative. It's not that relative. It's objective, right? It's not subjectively relative. So, microcosm of European society. So, who do we find here? We find ideological diversity. This is one of the reasons it's so interesting. First of all, we have an Italian by the name of Settembrini. These are the best ideas of the Italian Risorgimento, the rebirth of Italian nationhood in the 19th century, right? Get the Austrians out, get the French out, have a separate independent country. He is a liberal. He is an optimist. He thinks that democracy can solve problems. And ultimately, you can see from the events of the book that his doctrine does not prevail. His main antagonist in these long discussions is a guy called Leo Nafta, who is a reactionary, mystical, obscurantist ideologue. He starts off from Eastern Europe, but he falls in with the Jesuits and is trained by the Jesuits. So this is somebody who does not believe in progress and liberalism, but rather in a much more pessimistic sort of creed. And these two eventually clash. It actually comes to a duel between them with pistols, and Settembrini fires his pistol into the air. Nafta demands that Settembrini take a shot at him, and Settembrini says, "No, I shoot where I want." And then Nafta takes his gun and shoots himself. He kills himself. So in that contest, again, it's liberalism against mysticism and obscurantism. There's another guy. This is Mynheer Peeperkorn. So Mynheer Peeperkorn is Dutch, and he represents decadentism. Not liberalism, not even, a kind of religious obscurantist reaction, but Mynheer Peeperkorn represents decadence, and indeed decadentismo. Right? There's a whole school of writers at the end of the 19th century who are decadent. Nietzsche talks about being a decadent, at least sometimes, but in particular we'd want to point to Gabriele D'Annunzio of Italy, who was flamboyant poet, actually set up, in many ways, D'Annunzio created the pilot project for fascist regimes. This was in Fiume, in a border town of Italy, Yugoslavia, in 1919. And anyway, there's also Jory Karl Huysmans, à rebours, in reverse. So these are decadent people. Mynheer Peeperkorn is a decadent. What does he do? He kills himself. So we have two suicides in the course of the book. The idea, though, overall is sickness and decadence and death. And at the end, Hans Castorp goes to fight in World War I. You get the idea that he's not going to get out of it. So that's where they have their meeting. Davos, Switzerland,